Taking advantage of me is pretty fucking easy. All you gotta do is say mentally ill, and it infers something to the American mind. Well, to people's minds all over the world. We all know schizophrenic people. We also know a lot of people that are misdiagnosed. Did you know that? Over half of those diagnosed with schizophrenia in the United States are not schizophrenic, according to Johns Hopkins University. That's right, over 50% were misdiagnosed as schizophrenic. Most of them had PTSD. Most. The most commonly misdiagnosed is actually schizoaffective disorder. 75% of those diagnosed with schizoaffective disorder are just chronic liars. They're people who are hoping that they can tell a story cool enough that people will like them. Or a story believable enough that somebody will believe them and want to be friends with them. And number one is schizoaffective disorder. Number two is a type of clinically diagnosed depression. Clinically diagnosed, yes, but the type of depression is wrong. One of the things that nobody paid any attention to was my losses. The abuse that I had endured, the way that I had been treated by my friends and loved ones, and still to this day continue to be treated that way, as if I don't matter. They try to get a hold of me to let me know that they love me and they care about me. No, they don't. No, they absolutely don't. Only if I reach out to them first. There's a couple of exceptions that get a hold of me when they want something. Most people are like that, but as far as getting a hold of me and wanting to be my friend when they want something and then throwing a tantrum at me, it's horrible. There's a lot of women that I know who, after Natalie's death, their boyfriend left them and they were all sad and suicidal and needed a man, and they just wanted their lives to end. And then a guy fucking felt sorry for them and fucking gave them a chance. And then all of a sudden their life is perfect and they're like, oh, well, it's just because you're negative. No, 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 no. I'm trying to get help stopping ongoing abuse. That is not negative. What the fuck is wrong with you? You're complaining for fucking 3 weeks about how lonely you were and how suicidal you were because you were stuck alone and blah, 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 blah. But you know what? For you got yourself a boyfriend. You started having sex with somebody. He starts picking up some of the tab for you, and magically your life is perfect. And it's because of your attitude. No, you were a fucking shitty person. What do y'all women call it when a man is like that? You call it a pity fuck, don't you? So now you feel desired. You feel wanted. So you're happy. You're happy that you feel wanted and desired. I've never known what it's like to feel that way. Well, I know what it's like to be stalked by people who are doing things inappropriately. What was the difference between... Well, let's take a look at Natalie Bollinger versus Brianna Hernandez Cordona. Natalie Bollinger thought she was in love with me, but she didn't tell me till she was an adult. She thought she was in love with me. She had thought that she was in love with me since she was 13 years old. But I didn't have any fucking clue about it. I didn't even know her fucking name. The day I was going to kill myself in the Starbucks bathroom, that's when Natalie came into my life and started telling me all this shit. How she was suicidal because of her family and she was going to kill herself 100 times. And I was the only, thinking of me was the only reason she didn't. Like, here's this girl whose name I don't even know. She sat down with me for, I want to say, like 3 hours, 2 or 3 hours before Maddie Boa, who was supposed to meet up with Natalie, showed up. She was like, hey, you're a few hours late. So that's the thing, is that Maddie Boa had a really big crush on Natalie. Natalie had a really big crush on me. But I'm not good looking, so you go, oh, nobody would ever have any desire for Sean Schwartz. Nobody would ever be interested in Sean Schwartz. Look at him, he's ugly, he's ugly. Look at her, she's so pretty, she could never be interested in it. Never be interested in what? In being treated like she fucking mattered? Nobody in her life other than me treated her like she mattered. She was entertainment to them. Just like I'm just entertainment to all these people who get a hold of me and say they're sorry this happened to me. They wish there was something they could do. There is something you can do. You can fucking speak up. You have YouTube. You have Facebook. You even have access to the evidence. All you got to do is fucking ask. I will send it to you. But you have to fucking do something with it, for Christ's sake. Now let's take a look at the Longmont Hospital. This is in Boulder County, and officers all cover for other officers. You have to have somebody there who cares about you, with you and present, for an officer to maybe take it seriously. But your friend has to actually care about your rights instead of fucking simping off the first fucking opportunity or excuse they get. Oh, the cop said this. Well, how about you fucking look it up before assuming that a fucking cop told you the truth? How many of these cops, when we looked up whether or not what they said about the law was true, how many of these officers lied to us? When I say us, I mean us, as in us, the general public. Us, the victims. Because the only person they do this to. That they blow off on what they want to assume is no big deal. It can't be a major deal. It's happening to a homeless person. Well, we're the most likely people to be victimized. And here is why. Because you can blow us off and pretend that none of your crimes ever actually happened, that we made it up. You can prevent us from showing evidence in court or being even allowed to go to our court dates by being a pretty white girl and pretending that we're the bad guys. Oh, I'm afraid of a man. Why are you afraid of him? Because he's telling the truth about you and your drug habit? That is what happened with Natalie Bollinger. She was embarrassed. That's not my fault or my choice. Life fucking happens. Sometimes your car breaks down. Sometimes your phone is fucking broken. Sometimes you have no money. That doesn't mean that you're a bad person. The other thing is, every one of you with a smartphone who has access to the internet, who claims to care, when you're not speaking up, you're showing you don't care. Coordinate with the victim and help them to turn it in. Instead of looking at it for fucking entertainment like a bunch of sick, perverted shits. It's like watching child porn and jacking off to it and saying, oh, I was trying to catch child fucking pornographers. Well, why didn't you get a hold of anybody? Why didn't you try to get a hold of anybody? It's one thing if you tried to get a hold of somebody and you were blown off. It's another thing not to try at all. And if you're a sick fucking shit who's looking that stuff up and still doing nothing, then you're a piece of shit who is entertained by the fucking horrible misery that innocent people have to go through when you don't care. Why do school shootings happen? People are bullied to the point that they can't take it anymore. They walk into the school with that gun. They've got targets in mind, but once they get there, they realize those targets aren't there. Those aren't the first people they saw walking into the school. And it's kind of hard to hide an AR-15, isn't it? Most shootings are committed with handguns, people. I've got an education and the worst things that can happen to human beings because I've been bombarded with that shit my whole life. I didn't grow up in nice, pretty places. You guys want to consider Boulder a pretty place? It is pretty. And it is nice. It also comes at a cost in human lives. And unfortunately, those human lives are the most at-risk people in this country. This is why nobody in America is safe from my wrath. What is my wrath? Speaking up and showing the truth. I showed my predators were doing the things I said they did. But because of the mentally ill tag and it being loosely associated as schizophrenia, this is how officers like Scott DaCosta get away with this shit. It's called professional courtesy. You try to turn in an officer, and you're told to turn it into his department. So you try to turn it into his department, and you're bullied, threatened, and harassed because you had to go in alone. Everything after that is uphill. That's why I needed a friend or a family member to begin with, to go in with me and help me to record it, just in case they blew me off again. Because it's a lot harder when you blow it off, when you blow your friend off until people are being fucking killed. You're a fucking piece of shit friend. Meanwhile, it's a felony to take advantage of somebody who's schizophrenic in the way that I've been taken advantage of. But you know what? It's illegal to take advantage of any disabled person this way, not just schizophrenic people. But by trying to imply to the American public and trying to imply to hospitals that I am schizophrenic, officers literally outright lying to hospitals to protect other officers and to protect my predators. I didn't pretend that I didn't break the law when I did break the law. I explained that I was literally forced to do that, to try to get someone to look at the evidence of the abuse by the Bollinger family and by police. And that includes them repeatedly turning off their body cams, refusing to produce body cams. That also includes my own public pretenders doing everything they could to lie to me about the law. Tell me that it would take an act of God. Refused to requisition the body cameras. The police dragged it out as long as they could. But once it turned out that they would have to release the body cameras, that's when they dropped all charges, so they didn't have to release those. And nobody helped me to get those. When I tried to turn in officers to their own departments, I was abused by those departments. I was abused by those officers that I was trying to turn in as co-workers, or literally those officers themselves. I was literally forced to go to my predators in law enforcement to turn them into themselves, and other law enforcement officers that they coordinated with, as well as the Bollinger family who they coordinated with to gaslight me. And then they use their professional courtesy over and over and over again. Officers lying to hospitals and telling them that I'm schizophrenic. Officers lying to me and lying to my friends and family. Lying to people who are trying to help turn this in at the very beginning. Officers across the state of Colorado and Nebraska threatening, harassing, and intimidating my friends who offered to help me, like Candace Bondurant. And who is it that Candace Bondurant victimized and took advantage of and went out of her way to destroy his name? Candace Bondurant didn't do that to her predators or to my predators. She did that to me after making her empty promises, hiding behind her children as her excuse for helping my predators to get away with this over and over again, and becoming one of my predators herself. The same with her mother. None of them wanted to look at evidence. They wanted to do the "you're a man, you have to do it yourself" thing. I'm not going to look at it. I'm just going to tell you what to do. That's what got people killed to begin with. Women, in specific, in professional positions of power, who are mandated reporters. People like Candace Bondurant. People like Veronica Seward of Region 2. People like Tamara of Region 1, Nebraska. People like Kara Heller of Colorado Coalition of the Homeless. People like Terry Jepson, who is a nurse in Nebraska. And her daughter, Kimberly Jepson, who is a nurse in Nebraska. Danny Francis, who is a mandated reporter in Colorado. Chloe Pachovis, who is a mandated reporter in Colorado. Kara Heller is a mandated reporter in Colorado. There's a bunch of mandated reporters in South Dakota, Montana, Washington State, California, and Oregon. All of them committing felonies because they don't want to do their jobs for a homeless man, and they know they don't have to because nobody cares. If we had friends or family who cared, we wouldn't be homeless, and every single one of them knows that. I let my public pretenders know about the abuse that I was enduring in the jails and in the prison. They did not care. No matter what, they were just going to let people torture me in the jails and prisons. And now many of these predators who took part in torture against me are in prison themselves. The assistant warden of the Lincoln Correction Center in prison herself. One of the corporals there in the prisons, Michelle Decini, she's in prison now herself. There's another one, her name is Vicki Peterson, and I did have multiple encounters with her, but she was not one of the ones that committed major felonies against me. They brought her over from another unit, and sometimes she moonlighted on our unit. But when it comes to the mentally ill, the people who take that position are not good people who care about the mental health of the inmates. These are bullies who realize that they can make fun of retards all day and bully retards all day and pick on retards all day and fuck with retarded people's food. And that is how they view us, and that is how they treat us. They can antagonize us all day. By the way, I was sent to prison for trying to turn in registered sex offender Robert Franklin Mornick for a string of threats against my life, stalking behaviors, and an assault. When I was released from prison, he assaulted me again, just to let me know he could. Anytime he wants to hurt me, it's not going to be a problem. The Dual County Sheriff's Department will help him get away with it. Just like child abuser Joshua Rayborn, when he assaulted me, the Dual County Sheriff's Department helped him to get away with it. Just like when I was assaulted by Sheriff Scott DaCosta and State Trooper Lassen, Dual County Sheriff's Department helped to cover that up. And then I had to go to Dual County Sheriff's Department again when I was assaulted by him. After going to them repeatedly over the threats, harassment, and assaults, the abuse, and the people involved, people like Clint Snell, I let people know who was involved when it happened, just in case, because there were so many people involved. It's difficult to remember all their names. It's difficult to remember when you've got 8 different Kims, which Kim that it is whose last name just popped out of your mouth. Like, all right, did I say Kimberly Vaughn Martinez, or did I say Kim Jepson? You know? In Chapel, Nebraska, just like Boulder, Colorado, it was a matter of popularity and looks. You don't want the weirdos in your town. People who are different, people who are autistic, people who have Tourette syndrome. They must be druggies. They must be closet murderers, and so on and so on. If you notice, I scream at the top of my lungs about the horrible acts being committed against American citizens and people here in America, regardless of citizenship, who just happen to be human beings, god damn it. But each and every one of you are selfish enough to try to make it just about you and the group that you assign yourself to. We got a lot of people assigning themselves to the LGBT community now, not because they're a part of the LGBT community, because people actually are expected to care about the LGBT community. The idea that you should be allowed to harm anybody that you want, but anybody who stands up for themselves or defends themselves against you is a horrible person, a horrible racist, a horrible sexist. That a woman should be allowed to destroy a man's life with slander, resulting in physical harm and even death, very often. Nobody pays attention to the fact that all Natalie had to do was claim that I stalked her, and everything else, people pretending that I would have raped her or molested her. I was actually harmed. People actually harm me, actually assault me, actually destroy my finances, actually gaslight me to my friends, to my family, to the media. And I'm sent to mandated reporters like Danelle Boggs, who won't do shit. And her coworker Esther, who won't do shit. I'm sent to places like Tides of Change, where they're not mandated reporters, and the lady didn't take it seriously. The first thing we need to do is worry about the safety of the victim, which means that we need to find emergency services and make those calls with the victim, not 6 months from now. Here's what happens when you procrastinate for 6 months when somebody is victimized into homelessness. You pretend that they're still homeless because they're not trying. No, they're homeless because of the abuse. They came to you for help about the abuse. They needed you to go with them to help them to speak up. If you couldn't do it in person, you could have done it by phone, but you were too busy talking about yourself and making excuses. I've got over 15 hours of, I can't call it anything more than arguing with Chelsea Aiken. No matter what, any excuse why she can't tell the truth. Why she can't come forward. Like, why she can't speak up. Then she tells me that she's trying to fight for our rights. For the rights of marginalized people. No, she's not by ignoring us. Not by refusing to speak up. Every one of those conversations is an attempt to try to get help. To try to get one of my friends to actually care. And you get to hear through their suggestions how over and over again they weren't listening because they cared. They were listening because they felt obligated. Because I had treated them the way that they treat me. When I ask for help, they want to pity party me and treat me like I'm a horrible person for asking for help. That's not okay. Try to make me feel as if I'm a bad person or a horrible person because I'm asking for help when I need it. From people who claim to care about me. You don't care about me. Otherwise, you'd have listened. You'd have made the time to listen instead of talk about yourself nonstop. All of the time that I spent and all of the money that I spent so that I could have the resources, so that I could actually speak with you and show you evidence. And you weren't even willing to look at it. You were bored. You just pretended like you cared. Now then, my predators, when it comes to a diagnosis, one thing that's important is that friends and family should be involved. When it comes to the difference between treated like you are delusional or the people who harmed you going to jail or prison, is whether or not Your friends or family speak up for you, whether or not they care enough to find out what's going on. If they don't even care enough to find out what's going on because they're too busy talking about themselves, they've showed that they only care about themselves. However, it is still evidence that you tried to get help. All of those appointments that I went to, I was sent to all of these places who are supposed to be mandated reporters so that I can get help stopping frequent and ongoing abuse. And all these people did was procrastinate, waste my time, and waste your taxpayer dollars, because they're all having me sign these pieces of paper and give them these cards that allow them to take money from your Medicare that you're paying for. Your taxes are paying for. I'm no longer capable of working. People pretend that because I drive, that means that I can't be disabled. They want to pretend that I chose to be victimized monetarily until I couldn't take care of myself. Those back payments, when you're a disabled person, those back payments are important because they help you to get established, to get a safe place where you are not subservient, where you actually have rights. What it takes for you to have rights is to be a property owner. If you are not that, if you are too broke and too uncared about, you end up on the streets being victimized by literally everyone and told that it's your fault. Neglect is abuse. Police officers neglecting the abuse against me before Natalie was killed directly led to Natalie Bollinger getting her fucking brains blown out, and directly led to me attempting suicide on multiple occasions over abuse by police. Many of those police officers who abused me to the point that I literally attempted suicide. And friends who literally, that's right, friends who victimized me to that point as well. And I'm treated like I'm a horrible person because I want my life to end, because nobody cares to stop the abuse. They'll talk nice at me. Self-advocacy for a disabled person doesn't work. We're told to self-advocate, but we're talked over and disrespected by police officers, by our friends, by our families. They want ungodly amounts of money that you don't have because you don't even have enough as a disabled person to take care of yourself. And then you are spending all of your money on having to buy the evidence of their abuse against you from them, but you can't get it from them because they're going to, instead of allowing you to turn them in, they tell you, oh, well, you need to tell me what happened and I'll decide if it's illegal or not. And then they talk over you the whole time. When you're getting to a part where you're going to fill in the details, they know that's what you're doing and they immediately start talking over you. That goes for every single one of these pieces of shit, from 911 operators to the Nebraska Attorney General's office to the State Patrol. They're all going to play mentally retarded like they don't know what the law is. When you try to turn in a police officer and they're allowed to take you to a hospital and call you schizophrenic, and the doctor just writes it down because the cops said so, and you try to explain that you're trying to turn in cops, that there is evidence of it, that you're trying to get shown, and those cops are trying to peg you as schizophrenic and delusional so that you can't show the evidence. That you were trying to show the evidence when the cops that you were harmed by and brought into the hospital by committed felonies against you, and all they had to do was call you schizophrenic, call you delusional, and they're going to get professional courtesy. The other officers are just going to believe them because they have badges. And all these officers have done this, so they all know that it's bullshit. They all know that they're helping to destroy an innocent man's life, but that man doesn't matter. Between this officer who committed felonies and they go, oh, well, you know, anybody could have made that mistake. It shouldn't be a situation where this officer has his entire life destroyed because he made one mistake. Meanwhile, it's not one mistake. It's many, many choices by these officers. Choices, decisions to disrespect the victim. The same goes for the mandated reporters that we're sent to. Who are we sent to as disabled and at-risk adults? We're sent to mental health. People like Danelle Boggs. People like TFCC. People like CARE. People whose jobs it literally is to coordinate with the police and with adult protective services. That is 100% their job, 100% of the time. That goes for school nurses and Broken Bow who don't do their jobs and lead to students committing suicide, like Terry Jeffson, the school nurse. As a mandated reporter, she did not do her job with me or with that boy who committed suicide. Boys are at risk of committing suicide at 5 times the rate of girls starting at 15 years of age. That's because of people like Terry Jepson, people like Scott DaCosta, people like Kim Jepson, people like Kara Heller, people like Megan Missigatis. She's employed at the University of Nebraska-Lincoln, which makes her a mandated reporter. She's also a Nebraskan, which makes her a mandated reporter. All these people wanting to use the fact that they're not mandated reporters as an excuse to not come forward is horrible, because in Nebraska, even a 6-year-old can be incarcerated for not doing their job as a mandated reporter. Let me tell you about a child molester and a hero. The child molester is Wesley Reiner, 88958. Sexual assault against a child, a toddler. He raped his 3-year-old brother in front of another child, and that other child told. Who is the hero of that story? The rat, the narc, the snitch. You parents who teach your children not to snitch, you're the most horrible excuses for human beings on this planet. You teach your kids that they're horrible people if they tell you about the abuse they're enduring, that they're bad if they tell. When your son or daughter is chased by someone of the opposite gender on the playground, if a boy chases down your son and beats on him on the playground, you tell your boy to beat that boy up, don't you? When that happens with your girl, you tell her the same thing, don't you? Or do you tell them they should go to a teacher? As a boy, here's the thing that you don't pay attention to. 80% of male suicides, 80% of them, the person who committed suicide went to a friend or family member. 80% of the time when a male commits suicide, and that's because of the way that you treat us, because of the way that mandated reporters and friends like Veronica Seward of Region 2, Nebraska, who is both a mandated reporter and a friend, and Danny Francis, who is both a mandated reporter and a friend, Chloe Pachovis, who is both a mandated reporter and a friend, Kimberly Jepson, who is both a mandated reporter and a friend. Well, at least they were until I told the truth. These mandated reporters don't think that they should have to pay the price for the crimes that they committed. They don't think that they should lose everything that they worked for, that they earned, because they did something against the law. The people who told me that they would look at the evidence, I sent evidence to. The people who were busy making excuses, I didn't. There's no reason to. They're not going to come forward about what they know. I do try to send it to them in case they do care, and later on they show that they didn't. They didn't look. Some of them want to say things or type things at me like, oh, well, you were just sending me random stuff. It wasn't random stuff. It was what was going on at that point in time. The abuse that I was enduring at that point in time that I needed help stopping. I reached out to all of you for help because you claimed to be my friends. I'm one of those 80% of men who reached out to friends and family before attempting suicide. We're all taught we're supposed to feel sorry for women and drop everything for them all at once over every sob story. When men are abused, even disabled and at-risk men, even though the law says that we're supposed to try to turn this in right away, that we're supposed to go with a friend or family member who actually cares about us, because otherwise we're going to get blown off. Everyone who works in the United States government knows this. Everybody who works in childcare knows this. If you don't have a friend or family member that cares, there's no sense in trying to turn it in. You're just going to get taken advantage of by the system. They're going to force you through hoops for help that they know doesn't help. That is just a temporary band-aid. Finally getting into housing in Chapel, Nebraska, after being targeted by people in Chapel, Nebraska, I still had to take that abuse when I went out and about. When I went to go to the grocery store, I had to see my predators and be afraid because I couldn't turn them in to the police because the police in Chapel, Nebraska were my predators as well. You pretend that police wouldn't do this to homeless people. They wouldn't do this to me because I'm white. I'm white, so they would never do this. I'm a male, so they would never do this. All these women's groups like Me Too trying to make it sound like nobody ever helps women. No. Lots of people help women. That's why they do attention-getting behaviors, like slicing themselves. When you slice yourself in a place that you make publicly visible, you are doing so because you want someone to stop and listen to you. You are fighting for attention, negatively. When a man is literally being abused to the point that he wants his life to end, you treat him like he's just attention-seeking. And that is why he commits suicide. You show him that he doesn't matter. He has come to you about abuse and gone to all the places he's supposed to go to about the abuse. But the one thing that he doesn't have is a friend or family going with him to those places so they take it seriously. When you have evidence against a police officer and all he has to do is take you to a mental hospital or press false charges against you, and then he has access to your evidence, or access to have your evidence towed or thrown away. And there's not a goddamn thing you can do about it because you don't have a friend or family member there who cares. You have to beg them. You have to pay them money that you don't have as a disabled person to actually help you. You have to pay your friends to tell the truth. It shouldn't have cost a goddamn penny for them to tell the truth. To go in person with me, yeah. But you don't necessarily have to go in person with me. We can find out how to do the three-way call thing, and we can do that. Yes, it'll take some work, but instead of saying you don't know how to do it and you can't, let's make an effort at learning how together so we know how. My predators have these electronic abilities that I don't have, that most of my friends don't have. They don't have the money for a fucking computer. Their back payments for their disability was spent paying off bills that were required because they couldn't take care of themselves, and their friends and family members treated them like they were lazy pieces of shit mooches because they were fucking disabled and needed help. You can't get disability without help. And once you have disability, Once you have that disability income, and it is evidence of long-term and lifelong disabilities that make you an at-risk adult, they're not allowed to look away from those disabilities and how you are treated because of the risks. You want to pretend that everybody with the mentally ill tag, or everybody who's autistic or has cerebral palsy or Down syndrome is John Malkovich from Of Mice and Men. And I get to tend the rabbits. Like we're gonna fucking do horrible shit to you. He broke her neck on accident because his fingers got stuck in her hair and she freaked out on him. She freaked out on him and he was fucking scared. He already knew that he was gonna be harmed even though he didn't do anything wrong. And that's when he decided to do something wrong. That's right, George. And I get to tend the rabbits. If you're gonna treat me like I'm a Lanny, for God's sake, fulfill that duty to the end. And I get to tend the rabbits. Type that in YouTube. Type in the words, and I get to tend the rabbits. You get to see that scene in Of Mice and Men. And I get to tend the rabbits. Scott DaCosta lied to the whole town in Chapel, Nebraska, same as my mom did. My mom got busted having sex with Doug Cowden and doing drugs with Doug Cowden after Doug ripped me off for my wages and for the money that I had to buy a vehicle with. He spent it on drugs, him and my older brother. And instead of my mom doing something about it, she went out and did cocaine and had sex. Then she kicked me out of the house for speaking up about it when she came in with her hair fucked up. White boogers still hanging out of her fucking nose. And her shirt buttoned up crooked. Shameful. She plays Christian, but she's a married woman. But my stepdad is the epitome of simp. He's my mom's bitch, and he knows it. Despite that, I think he did the best that he could to try to raise 4 kids that were not his. Raise 5 kids that were not his. His wife is the biggest child in the whole goddamn house. She's also a manipulator because she's learned that she can. Somehow, magically, every time that she does something wrong, it's Scott's fault, or her kid's fault, or her dad's fault, or her mom's fault. We have taught women to make a profession out of blaming others. We have taught every woman in America that it is okay for her to be a narcissist. We're supposed to assume that she's the victim and a man is the predator. You don't stop to look at how many women take advantage of at-risk men, and how many women in my situation that I knew that claimed to be my friends did exactly that. Took advantage of me because I didn't have anyone else. They knew that I had to depend on them, that I was subservient, and that they could keep on changing the rules until I ultimately had to do what they wanted, which was absolutely nothing useful. I needed someone to turn in these crimes with me, someone who cared enough to listen, not to talk over me and talk down at me like I'm a fucking mule or a dog. Lanny Engeline is one of the most despicable human beings when it comes to treating people like that. She's got female simps too. People like Jerry Sparks, who is also a manipulator. When a man has exhausted all of his resources on her, she pretends like he's a violent person because he explains, hey, I'm not a fucking piggy bank. I don't have a bottomless fucking tank full of money. And yeah, I know that's not a possibility. How can it be full of money if there's no bottom? Well, we could think about gravity. What if it goes to the center of the earth, and the earth is a solid core? And then it goes out the other side. Well, gravity's still going to pull it towards the center. But then it technically does have a bottom where you're going to stop, dead center. Meanwhile, when it's an incredibly complicated situation like this, and you've got to try to explain it in a tiny amount of time that the doctor is going to spend, like, of course, at Clearview, where they were taking advantage of people for their disability money and their disability insurance, like they did with me. Held them longer than they were allowed to. In all these situations, they were allowed and able to make it their word versus an at-risk adult's by not having audio recording devices. So it becomes their word versus their victims. You get to see how Scott DaCosta got to tell everybody in town that I was schizophrenic so they wouldn't listen. Got to tell hospitals and jails that I was schizophrenic so they wouldn't listen. And then I was repeatedly sent to Scott DaCosta by Nebraska State Patrol to turn in Scott DaCosta and his deputies. Nebraska Attorney General's office kept on sending me to Nebraska State Patrol. I have to turn in the officers to their department, but if one of those officers is the sheriff, I can't turn it into their fucking department. Nebraska Attorney General's office knows this. Nebraska State Patrol knows this. And then, of course, when I call back and say, hey, these people are not doing their job, they're making no effort to take the situation seriously. They're making no effort to coordinate and work together with APS. They're telling me over and over again, I have to call them by myself. By law, they're supposed to call and coordinate together, not to threaten, harass, and intimidate the victim, and lie to them about the law. That's called color of law. When each of these agencies, not just police, but also prosecutors, public defenders, judges, multiple judges committed felonies against me. These are federal mandated felonies. That means that, well, since they were committed against an at-risk adult and it is a heinous crime, it is treated the same as rape. That is a heinous crime as well. That means that these people can be arrested at any point in time. The thing is that there was a limited amount of time before they were legally allowed to destroy their evidence, and I needed to be able to turn in a report and have it verified with another human being that it was in fact and indeed turned in. Without a friend or family member to do that, and then friends and family members who finally did. Now let me show you this. This is garbage. It's an empty pot container. These things are all over the place. At least it's just pot. All the needles and stuff that they've got all over Washington State, they're not as prevalent here. The reason that they're not as prevalent here is because the drugs are legal. So so people aren't afraid of carrying their needles or taking them to a sharps container. Now, one thing that I don't like, however, is that it makes everyone look bad. Now, this one too. Once it's empty, they discard it. It's empty. Oh, there's some water in it. That's not cool. Now, I get treated like I'm... Well, the term mentally ill is used to loosely pretend that I'm schizophrenic. Meanwhile, all of the things that you hate me for are signs of abuse against males. You know what? I spoke too soon. I don't know who owns this property, but that right there is a needle. I am not sure what the protocol is in this town when there's a needle, but I'm for certain that if somebody's kid goes back there and tries messing around or playing, that nobody wants that heroin needle there, just like people don't want these pot containers all over the place. Hey, do you know what the protocol is for... There's a needle right behind that wall there.
Ooh, I don't know. Somebody needs to get it though.
Right?
Yeah. Maybe the city, like, call the non-emergency and let them know.
I'm a hobo. They won't listen to me. No, we're not on good terms because they don't listen to me.
They don't like me either. So.
They don't like anybody right now. They got this power tripping thing going on right now. I got a whole bunch of people telling me about the human trafficking in the area.
Right.
I've got people that I met when I first got here who are missing from here, and nobody's taking it seriously.
My probation officer, he was really afraid that my son was going to get snatched up. That was one thing that he said to me. He's like, you got a good-looking boy. He's like, you don't want him trafficked. I was like, nope, we don't.
Right now, the most likely to be trafficked are, well, all right, so I came here... I've been all over the United States helping find missing people and stuff like that. But one of the places I was at was Hardin, Montana. And I've got a video on my YouTube channel. It's called The Missing Women of Hardin, Montana, where I speak about the over 100 people missing from such a small area in a 10-year period. It's the epicenter for missing and murdered indigenous people in the country. But the United States, well, first of all, the news didn't bother to report on that until 2019. Or almost 2020, almost a full year after I reported it. And then the United States government didn't initially verify that formally and publicly until 2021. Oh, sorry, I shouldn't bug you on your break.
What I would do is go to the customer service desk and let them know there's a needle right out here, and then they can deal with it.
All right, thank you.
Yeah, have a good day.
Yes, ma'am.
Channel called again. I'll check it out.
Sean David. It's a picture of me holding a goat.
Okay, all right, Sean David.
Go ahead. I got this, so you're good. I was going to cross the street in the wrong place, but I got a cane, so it takes a bit. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm all for people being allowed to smoke their ganja. I'm just not okay with pot containers all over the place, making everyone look bad. It reflects badly on all of us. There's a needle outside. Do you know that? All right. Thank you, ma'am. Excuse me, ma'am. Somebody left a needle outside.
Left a what?
A needle. I'm not sure what the protocol is to do with it, but it's on the ground.
Oh,
I
thank
would
you.
call
Wow, I
the
didn't get to
cops,
see
but they
it.
don't usually listen to homeless people. It's not on your property. It's just the other side of the wall. I went over to sit on it and rest on it for a minute. And I
Oh,
noticed it over there.
wow. Yeah.
I don't care whose property it's on. I
No,
just
he
want
says
to,
it's a needle, like on the other side of the driveway.
just on the other side of that wall with the green box.
Oh, okay. Oh,
But
like the Elks parking lot or something?
the Elks, is
The
that what
Elks.
it
I think it's
is?
the Elks. Elks or the Eagles. I always get the two mixed up.
It's the Elks.
All right. And their building is attached to the property?
Yeah.
All right, I'll go let them
they-
know.
But their building is that yellow one right there.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
Sesame. Thanks. It's the Elks Lodge. Yeah, this is where it was found, but I've seen kids come over here, sit on this. I've seen moms come over here while they're on the phone and talk right here while their kids are running around a bit. For the most part, we try to keep them out of the road. Yes, ma'am. Blind lady with a CNI dog. You can see only some movement that's not the same as being able to see. She said thank you when I moved to the side as well. God, my back is killing me. Now, obviously, this is probably a little more work than it really needed to be. I could have just put it in the garbage can, but what happens? Lid falls off, or somebody drops it and it breaks the plastic and they get jabbed. Just not cool. Well, that's not going to work. They're closed. Hello. All right, so I'm just gonna go ask if they have a sharps container. Of course, in Washington State, there wouldn't be any reason to try. There's literally hundreds of them behind almost every business, you know? All right. Oh my God, my fucking back is killing me. There's nobody over at the Elks Lodge. Is there a
There's
Sharps container
nobody there, I
here?
think, on Sunday. After you left, I thought about that. I think Sundays it's closed, so.
Well, I'm willing, if you guys got some napkins, I'm willing to pick it up, and I probably have something in my car. It's on the ground where kids can
I
get
mean,
hold of
I
it.
do, but.
I don't have a Sharp container because I don't do any of that, so I
Yeah, I
just,
don't know.
thank you very much. Yeah. Just saw a woman here who looked just like Allison Fornander. Bless you. I did think about using one of those little pot containers to put it in. They're not long Yeah, she had a look on her face, the cringeworthy type too. That's the thing about encountering stuff like that. Is really, what do you do? Nobody wants to take responsibility, and cops won't listen to me. It's not that I don't try. I've shown time and again what happens when you try alone. And I got lots of people who want to be angry with me because they made a claim that they tried alone. They've got no evidence of it and never made any effort to come forward about it to the public or the police. You guys don't stop to recognize how fucked up public opinion is. The Me Too movement is probably the most fucked up movement in American history. It's worse than the KKK. Yeah, you're welcome for fighting for your rights. Nationalism is the most evil thing I know. Sorry, sexism is the most horrible prejudice I know. Nationalism is the second. Alright. I've got 2 garbage cups to put it in. And then I think I might go Get some sticks. Up there is storage. Make myself a little boat. Being victimized into oblivion is not freedom. A lot of people tell me how lucky I am to live in the United States, where I'm free. Really? Free to do what? Everything that you could possibly do as a homeless person has a fine that comes along with it. If you gotta pee, there's a fine for that. They even fine the fuck out of you for not having enough money. Sure, in a perfect world, we'd never get injured, we'd have great jobs that we love, and we'd get paid enough to live on. But that ain't the reality, is it? Anyway, so here I am out here picking up friggin' druggies needles because I don't want somebody's kids fucking around with it. People won't take responsibility to clean it up, they just walk by it, and then of course a few days from now when somebody's toddler gets back here and starts fucking with it, and these people want to throw a tantrum that nobody did anything. Why didn't anybody do anything? Well, somebody's doing something. I'm throwing it away. And no, I don't feel comfortable doing it this way. But then there's the fact that, I mean, really, nobody here knows what to do. There's no sharps container, apparently. I should probably show it to you. It's a needle. Anyway, I'm putting it in the cup here. That way, nobody's kid ends up messing with it. You notice how instead of getting rid of the needle and making that a priority, the priority's pretty much been to go talk to somebody else and someone else's responsibility. It'd be just as easy to have a designated sharps area. Now, at least here where the drugs are legal, people usually do throw them away, whereas Washington State, it wouldn't have been just one needle. There's hundreds behind all of the businesses up there. Ugh. Now they're gonna try to make it all legal and all that stuff in Washington State. Maybe people pick that shit up now. But the situation with Washington State is a lot different than the situation with Boulder, Colorado. Sorry, I'm making sure I watch out for traffic. In Seattle, Washington, the heroin epidemic hit there in 1993. It didn't hit Boulder until 10 years later. Don't get me wrong, there's definitely always been people that have had access to opiates and opium and heroin in Boulder, but it didn't reach epidemic proportions until the situation in 2003 with all the juggalos bringing it in. These guys do the same thing the Deadheads did, or the folks who follow the string cheese incident, other knockoff bands like that. It's called going to venues. Now, for a lot of the hippies, you know, the Grateful Dead generation, that turned out to be mostly pharmaceuticals and pot, a lot of hallucinogenics. But for the juggalos, you know, when they were going to venues to sell their drugs, it was different drugs. I mean, sure, you get that normal variety, but I mean, the heroin thing was real big. It's real big in the raver culture, and it's real big in the rape culture. See, I've never tried heroin, but I've had quite a few of my friends who got addicted to it, and they explain that it's just a feely good. And once you've felt it, you don't want it to go away. These are people who inject it. And you guys might not understand there's a distinction and a difference in the type of people who use and how they use it. Some people like to smoke meth, and they do get pretty fucked up. But the ones that see gacking, I'll give you an example of what gacking looks like. What gacking looks like is when you see somebody, well, that's not going to get my whole body, is it? Alright, so gacking is when someone's all doing the meth dance. These are people who inject it into their, oh god, that fucking hurts. These are people who inject it into their bodies, and they do the whole sticking the tongue out a whole bunch. And it's very scary for people around them. One of the things for me having Tourette syndrome is that I have what's called tics. I don't mean tics like a deer tick, like you might get in western Nebraska. I mean tics as in a neural signal in response, like when I wink one eye or the other. That's more likely to happen if I'm nervous or scared. When I'm angry, I tend to not do that at all. I tend to make my face look angry like a Maori warrior. And that's one thing that you learn growing up in the system, is how to make yourself scarier and more imposing. In reality, the scariest thing about me as a kid was, well, I'd bite you. The scariest thing about me as a teenager was that by that time I was vicious and mean and big enough to make sure that anybody who put their hands on me knew that I was vicious and mean. As long as you were good to me, I was good to you. But who likes being assaulted? Nobody. Well, all right. We know there's people who are into the S&M thing. All right. But that aside, that's not something that you want every day, every moment of your day, is it? I mean, if that's what arouses your whatever, that's on you. As long as your partner is consensual and you're consensual, whatever. Don't tell me that a child is able to give you consent, because that's definitely not the case. The biggest issue that we have today facing the entire country is the sheer quantity of expenses that are going to force homeless people into incarceration. And that just bulks up numbers of false accusations, and it also bulks up the numbers of the mentally ill tag crap that we've got to deal with so prevalently. Like when Scott Costa wanted to run around and tell everybody I was schizophrenic in Chapel, Nebraska. He also got to be in charge of all that. See, here's how it went. On Thursday, I was supposed to meet with Nebraska State Patrol, who was supposed to finally do something to help me turn in Scott DaCosta. This is 2020, I want to say. So they're finally going to do something about Scott DaCosta. And the Nebraska State Patrol officer from Nebraska State Patrol Troop E, she's going to meet me that Thursday. She's just got to coordinate with her boss, and they're going to call me to make sure that we can do it on Thursday. She's going to check with her boss, and then she's going to call me back. Well, Thursday comes around, and not only did she not call me back, but now at this point I'm dealing with the situation with being assaulted by Robert Franklin Warnick. This is after multiple situations with him where I tried to turn it into the Dual County Sheriff's Department, where there was evidence at the places that I was at that I was the one stalked, not Robert. But the thing is, Dual County Sheriff's Department knew I had been trying to turn them in since 2018, and I'd been trying to turn them in for crimes that were committed by their deputies going back to 2017. All they had to do was pull the mentally ill tag over and over again. Scott DaCosta, knowing that I was trying to turn him in, and Leslie Snell, coordinated with Leslie Snell and her friend, registered sex offender Robert Franklin Warnick, to prevent me from turning them in. They used their professional positions over and over and over again. And then they get to use this reputation. Oh, we've met with him many times. See, here's the thing. They were trying to insinuate and infer things about the situations that were untrue. And the fact is that they were heard because none of my friends and not one mandated reporter through any of this has done their jobs. Not one of them has even tried. None of them. None of my friends have even tried either. Go in with me. Make the time. If you can make the time to argue with me today, if I'm assaulted today and I call you up and you're going to spend an hour and a half arguing with me, that's an hour and a half that you could have been helping me turn it in when it happened, which is what I'm supposed to do. Go to a friend or family member for help. Otherwise, I will get blown off. All officers have to do is to infer to the hospitals that we are schizophrenic or delusional. The nurse will write it down. The hospitals will write it down. But it's not the same as having a diagnosis. And that's the wonderful thing about it. In order to diagnose somebody with schizophrenia, it takes 6 months, same doctor. Now, when you're not allowed to show evidence, like, of course, when you're trying to show evidence, and then you're cut off from doing so because cops wanted to commit felonies. Again, this is the 11th time that Scott DaCosta and his deputies had done this with the false charges and shit since Natalie was killed. 11 times. That does constitute not gross negligence. At that point, that is gang stalking. Being forced to go to my predators to literally turn them in by name, being forced to turn in Scott DaCosta to Scott DaCosta, being forced to turn in his deputy, Deputy Hahn, to Deputy Hahn, being forced to turn in Cody Selhorst to Cody Selhorst. Having to turn in Michelle Decini to Michelle Decini. Having to turn in Sarah Nelson to Sarah Nelson. By her own admission, the reason that Polly Olson did the things that she did with me is because she's friends with the Dual County Sheriff's Department. She's friends with employees of the Dual County Sheriff's Department. She helped them get away with committing felonies, despite her personal and professional positions. She committed felonies to protect her friends, and now she's in jail for it, but she's got money. I mean, when you get to steal money from the county and you get paid a lot of money for it, that's the thing, is that this woman didn't need to fucking steal anything from anybody. But like I keep saying, when you let these predators do these things to me and they get away with it, it gives them a big head, and then they do it to others. Who is responsible for Zaid Atkinson and Michelle Rodriguez and all of the other victims of Officer Waylon Lolatai? Well, those victims are at fault. Because while Waylon Lolatai assaulted me, and he was there after assaulting others, and most of these people were already well aware of how physically abusive the cops are to the homeless there, they didn't come forward. They didn't care enough to come forward. They didn't care enough to speak up about this happening to another person. And then it happened to them. It happened to Michelle Rodriguez. It happened to Demetrius Shankling. It happened to Zaid Atkinson and Sammy Leon Lawrence IV. The things that I spoke up about over a year before 9 News did any investigating on Clearview. Before Clearview was ever shut down, before it was ever exposed that Clearview had covered up a murder of Tibor Hatay. But then again, when you're in prison and you're trying to explain that these things did happen, and you're having to talk to a doctor who has been told by Scott DaCosta that you're schizophrenic, that you're delusional, you don't have the ability to show that evidence. Scott DaCosta stole the evidence of the crimes committed by him and his deputies. Nebraska State Patrol officers across the state assisted him in committing these felonies. Jail guards assisted in these felonies. When I was sent to the hospital, Scott DaCosta made sure that he was in charge of all of it. All he had to do was slander my name and prevent me from turning him in. And he had a lot of help, including from repeat offenders like Robert Franklin Warnick. Abusing a person, abusing an at-risk adult until they have to move repeatedly is never fucking acceptable. Not even if they are schizophrenic. Doing this to a schizophrenic person is also a felony. To all of you dipshits who want to pretend that I'm schizophrenic. You're pieces of shit.